Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the most chilling examples of human error in the face of natural disaster. We're going to look at how a massive geological event turned into a catastrophic failure of human communication, literally wiping an entire city off the map and leaving tens of thousands dead. It's a wild story of ignored warnings, bureaucratic arrogance, and just a massive underestimation of nature. So let's dive into the 1902 tragedy of Montagne Pelée. Just listen to this. An 1851 scientific commission report actually called Mount Pelée no more than another curiosity, a picturesque decoration. I mean, wow. That staggering dismissal perfectly sets the stage for a story that is just steeped in tragic irony. The officials back then were actively pushing an illusion of total safety, completely blind to the horrific reality that was quietly building right in their backyard. They essentially treated a sleeping giant like a harmless lawn ornament. Which brings us to Section 1, a picturesque Caribbean curiosity. To really grasp the sheer scale of this loss, we have to picture Saint-Pierre at the turn of the 20th century. Sitting just 7 kilometers south of the mountain, it was this bustling, vibrant hub, celebrated as the cultural and economic heart of Martinique. People actually called it the Paris of the West Indies. We're talking paved streets, electric lighting, even a horse-drawn tramway. In 1902, it was home to around 26,000 people. That's a thriving Afro-Caribbean population of about 22,000, living alongside roughly 4,000 white French inhabitants. It was a city absolutely buzzing with trade and culture. But relying on that outdated 1851 report, local officials completely brushed off a long history of warning signs. Sure, there had been minor explosions, gas emissions, and phreatic eruptions, those violent steam-driven explosions when underground water heats up, back in 1851. But authorities just treated the volcano's ever-present plumes like a majestic theatrical backdrop. Get this, the mountain was actually advertised as a tourist attraction. They literally pitched it as a source of health and wealth. It's incredibly dark to think about now, but people were traveling there just to admire the exact thing that was about to destroy them. Moving on to Section 2, escalating warnings and downplays. Now, geology obviously doesn't care about tourist revenue or political convenience. Just look at the sheer speed of this escalating threat. Over just 2 weeks, the situation rapidly, violently deteriorated. We go from initial earth tremors on April 22nd to heavy, choking ash and steam just a couple of days later. By the 27th, terrified observers are seeing an actively boiling crater lake. And then things get truly deadly. On May 5th, massive mud flows, or lahars, rush down the River Blanche. These torrents are so immense, they actually trigger a tsunami when they hit the ocean. Finally, by May 6th, the mountain unleashes its first real lava eruption. The warning signs were literally screaming at them. Yet, despite these unmistakable precursors, despite ash blackening the sky and mud flows tearing up property, the message from leadership was just astonishingly dismissive. On May 7th, a local newspaper actually ran a report claiming that Mount Pelée offers no danger. Think about how baffling that is. The governor and the mayor actively prioritized keeping people calm over organizing a mass evacuation. The governor is traveling around giving reassuring speeches, while the mayor actually requested more troops, and not to help citizens evacuate, mind you, but just to maintain order and stop people from leaving the city. They literally trapped their own people in a massive hazard zone. Let's look at Section 3, the Fatal Commission Report. So, to justify this dangerous calm, the governor hastily threw together a brand new scientific commission. On the evening of May 7th, they meet and officially declare the volcanic activity normal. They confidently concluded that based on the crater locations, the city of Saint-Pierre is perfectly safe. In a heartbreaking twist of dramatic irony, they issued that exact statement to the public. And the very next morning, every single member of that commission, including the governor and his wife, who stayed behind to project confidence, perished in the eruption. This brings us to Section 4, the devastation of May 8th. On the morning of May 8th, 1902, that illusion of safety shattered instantly. When we examine the ruins of Saint-Pierre, the orientation of the remaining standing walls is incredibly telling. They are all sheared off in the exact same direction. This pattern explicitly demonstrates the immense directional force of a lateral blast that leveled the entire city in seconds. You see, this wasn't your traditional eruption shooting straight up into the atmosphere and raining down ash. No, it blew outward. It came roaring straight down the side of the mountain, sweeping across the town with unfathomable power. Take the downtown Saint-Pierre Theater, for example.
What was once a vibrant cultural hub was instantly transformed into stripped, defoliated ruins. But if we look closely at the ground and the remaining stairs in the aftermath, there's surprisingly little ash deposited. Everything is burned, everything is blown away, but it's not buried. So why would a blast this destructive leave so little ash behind? Well, it's because this was a highly unique type of volcanic event, one that was profoundly destructive, yet curiously mass poor. It wasn't about the weight of the debris, it was all about phenomenal heat and incredible speed. The devastation was actually caused by what we now call a nuée ardente, which translates to a glowing cloud. It's a superheated, fast-moving pyroclastic flow made entirely of incandescent gas and volcanic matter. Just imagine, an avalanche of boiling gas moving at hurricane speeds. And here's the most tragic kicker. This specific phenomenon was entirely unknown to science at the time. This perfectly explains why the Commission's models failed so miserably. They were looking for well-documented hazards like slow lava flows or heavy ash. They simply didn't have the scientific framework to even predict a supersonic avalanche of boiling gas that would incinerate everything in its path instantly. Section 5. Flawed Relief and Secondary Disasters. Following that catastrophic blast, the main geological event ended, but human mismanagement quickly sparked a terrible secondary wave of suffering. Now, the initial 26,000 deaths from the blast were horrifying enough, right? But they were immediately followed by immense displacement. Up to 25,000 refugees fled to nearby areas, totally traumatized and stripped of everything they owned. And instead of robust, organized support, these survivors faced a complete nightmare. They were hit with widespread famine, chaotic reconstruction efforts, and deadly misinformation spread through rampant rumors, which just compounded the tragedy way beyond the initial eruption. Relief efforts across the region were completely inconsistent and totally mismanaged. Adding insult to injury, the surviving administration showed shocking intolerance toward the predominantly non-white survivors. Because of these systemic failures, and really just a lack of any cohesive long-term plan, refugees were prematurely cut off from vital support by mid-August. And incredibly, to relieve the economic burden on the remaining towns, these displaced people were actively encouraged to return to their destroyed homes right in the middle of the hazard zone. The result of this forced return? Another deadly strike by a nuée ardente on August 30th. This time it wiped out the newly resettled town of Morne Rouge, killing thousands more. Section 6. Legacy and Cultural Impact. So, how does the world react to such an unprecedented catastrophe? Well, in the wake of the tragedy, global society processed the shock in a bizarrely modern way. They rapidly turned it into entertainment. Believe it or not, that very same year, the famous French filmmaker Georges Méliès released a short silent film titled The Eruption of Mount Pelée. Just think about that for a second. 1902. They commodified the tragedy for a global audience almost instantly. They were recreating the disaster on film using miniatures and smoke before the real dust had even settled in Martinique. It's a really striking example of how quickly human suffering can be repackaged for public consumption. Yet, while the entertainment industry moved at lightning speed to capitalize on the spectacle, the crucial scientific and public policy lessons were incredibly slow to catch on. Just months later, in October of 1902, the Santa Maria volcano in Guatemala violently erupted. Because the global lessons from Martinique hadn't been properly shared or acted upon by authorities, history basically repeated itself. Warning signs were once again misunderstood or completely ignored, and as a direct result, over 5,000 more people were needlessly killed. As we look back at the fatal miscalculations of 1902, the falsely reassuring news articles, the doomed scientific commission, the rapid rush back into the danger zone, we have to ask ourselves a pretty tough question. When nature gives us warnings today, are we truly listening? Do we honestly evaluate the data, or do we prioritize comfortable illusions over uncomfortable truths? Thank you for exploring this vital slice of history with me on This Explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll catch you next time.